Welcome to the video regarding long-term athletic development, which you're going to be going through today. The objective is which I want you to be able to describe and explain what long-term athletic development actually means by the end of this video. So these shortcomings are pretty much down to the developmental levels being neglected, and our expert coaches are pushed towards our more senior players, when in fact we should be looking to put our best coaches with some of our youngest players for when they're developing their fundamental movement skills or just pretty much learning how to train and how to compete. The next part is fundamental movement skills, such as your walking, running, jumping, hopping, galloping, striking, throwing, catching. Is these fundamental skills involved in all sports that are being poorly taught, either by teachers or by coaches. And we're finding that most coaches at the moment are either unaware or neglect critical periods of what's called accelerated adaptation. Now this is what's known as peak height velocity or peak strength velocity. So this is when children or adolescents are going through their biggest growth spurt or their biggest improvements in strength. Now, if for example we take Jersey Rugby Club, the academy is pretty much made up of volunteers, parents. How many of these individuals have education or background or qualifications in adolescent or child physiology and how they grow and how they develop? So therefore they're planning training sessions regardless of thinking about the actual developmental age of their participants, and are planning sessions that aren't meeting those needs. This doesn't come down to just the individual sports clubs. This comes to a whole organisational approach that addresses every single level of the sports development continuum. And we can see here that school PE, recreational, so those are our sport clubs, our community programs, and our elite and performance programs, they're not linking up. They're not talking to each other. They're not saying, for example, little Jimmy, who plays football, we don't know how many games he's playing a week. He then goes off to rugby. How many games of rugby is he playing? How many minutes of then athletics is he go off and doing? We have no idea about the level or the amount of training that they're doing, and if it's complementing each other or if it's actually working against each other. Now, a lot of the sports have their own kind of talent ID system. Looking at Jersey, we have the Centre of Excellence for Football that pretty much asks sports clubs and schools to recommend their players. However, a more integrated approach where the whole island is being screened from a young age. We're looking at individual athletes. We're recording every single one of our children who are playing sport. How much sport are they playing? What are they doing? We're also then looking at their physical characteristics, look at their speed, their current strength, their developmental age, their agility, their coordination. We're also going to look at their parents. So usually if two parents are quite tall, their child will be tall. If two parents can run quite quick, their son or daughter is also going to be quick. So we also have to take these things into account. However, at the moment, that isn't taking place. But what is taking place is that there's an early specialisation. Children are being forced into sports from an early age. For example, an organisation like Soccer Tots may be a first introduction for football and can teach those early fundamental skills of kicking and running. However, parents then may see that child put into nothing but football sessions for then the rest of their lives. So the only purposeful practice they're getting is in football, when the research is saying that at an early age, children should be playing multi-sports and shouldn't be specialising, as this leads to the child not learning the other fundamental skills, such as the hopping, the galloping, the throwing, the catching and the striking. And lastly, education regarding long-term athlete development. Is there enough education for coaches and teachers in the current sporting environment in Jersey? Now, there are some individuals and organisations that are trying to fix this, notably the FdA Sport Foundation. It's a charitable organisation, also known as the One Foundation. And then you also have Ben Harvey is trying to get the Jersey Sport Academy off the ground, which is a private organisation interested in doing the same thing. And the result is these things happening. So we have sort of students who may be good at kicking, but actually lack proper fitness and actually be sort of overweight. They can strike a ball well, however, they may be overweight and they may lack aerobic fitness. We have poor skill development. They're not learning the fundamental skills, such as throwing or striking, when they're actually too much emphasis being on kicking or running. And then that leads to these bad habits developing. And also, when getting pushed into just winning, there is then a push for your early maturers, so your students who pretty much mature faster and become stronger and taller. They then get more coaching compared to your other students who actually may have more natural talent. And finally, not having fun. And if a child isn't having fun, they're not going to want to do it. It's not going to be a lifelong skill for them if they're not enjoying it, because they won't want to engage when they actually get to choose whether they do it or not. And football finds this, that the biggest drop-off is between the ages of 16 and 18 from 11-a-side football. And that's been a big problem and has led to a decline in senior men's football, especially in the island. So we can see that the big picture consequences is that because these athletes are pulled in all different directions, playing different sports, different clubs, pressure on them to play for the island football team, the island cricket team, the island rugby team, the school football team, these athletes then have been mismanaged and fail to reach their genetic potential. They almost become stale from overplaying and not enjoying their sport because there's a lack of enjoyment through it, and that's a neglect in terms of social and emotional development. And then they don't meet their genetic potential, they don't become brilliant players, and then we see a lack of performers being produced that can compete on a national or international scale. So long-term athlete development can be defined with this pretty much statement here: specific and well-planned outline of training, competition and recovery. So what it is a long-term plan from pretty much the moment an athlete is born to well into their 40s, 50s or 60s. So it's charting every level and planning and preparing for every level so they can develop and reach their full potential. Now it has to take in numerous things. The physical development. Are they going through their peak height velocity? Is the athlete going through their growth spurt? Is the athlete having a mental challenge by having to compete so often? And then the training has to reflect this. For example, if a child is being overworked, perhaps then easing off on some of the more intense or competitive training. So we have to take this into account. So also we have their chronological age, so how old they are. This can differ from their biological age. For example, you could have a 14-year-old boy who has the biological age of a 16-year-old, and another 14-year-old boy has the biological age of an 11-year-old. So therefore, age banding sometimes may not be appropriate when choosing participants to play together. And New Zealand have actually been trialling a thing called biological banding, where rugby players can only play with people in their weight category in order to prevent head and concussion injuries. The research to show if this actually works has yet to come out, though. So an effective long-term athlete development model would integrate all elite community recreation and school sports in the island. So you've got the rugby club, so the Jersey Reds. You've got your Spartans club with your athletics, plus the JFA with football, and they're all coming together to ensure that all athletes are being managed and prepared and trained appropriately. And this idea of long-term athlete development would then also meet your 4 goals that Jersey would like to meet: enhance participation, so more people playing sport; enhance capacity, so more people have the opportunities to go out and play sport; a greater interaction between the different organisations, and actually improving the level at which people play at as well. So Jersey producing more top athletes. And finally, we have the 6 stages of long-term athlete development. We have our active start, so you have your youngsters, your toddlers, just learning the basics, having sort of lots of free play, lots of games, lots of sort of non-competitive movement actions in order to get them moving and interested in exercise. We then move on to the fundamentals, which is often taught in primary schools, either by primary school teachers, PE teachers, or in Jersey we have community school and sport development coaches will go in and deliver sessions based on fundamentals. So like we said before, this is your walking, running, galloping, hopping, jumping, striking, throwing and catching. So all the basics from which you then go into play sport. We then have the learning to train phase, where athletes will still be playing multi-sports, and they're learning how to commit to training, what's involved, maybe the basics of conditioning, using things such as body weight exercises, technical and tactical play, but still, like we said, non-specialised. We then sort of tend to move, as we come down into the training to train, is the conditioning steps up. We then tend to specialise in sort of 1 to 3 sports, and the athlete has an idea of the position they're going to play as well. And then we move into the training to compete. So they specialise in their sport, in their position, and they know exactly what kind of conditioning and technical and tactical training they need to do in order to compete at high level. And then we have the training to win phase, where they're then putting everything in order to be the best that they can be. And this is where you have your high-end training that is periodized in order to make the athlete peak at the correct times for competition in order to give their best performance and hopefully win. And the final stage that isn't on this is entering an active life. So this is pretty much your veterans, your masters, your football C teams, your over 35s, where players can maintain an active lifestyle through sport after they've been playing at a relatively competitive high level. And that's long-term athlete development. Now we're going to look at this a bit more in depth in the lesson, and we're going to look to evaluate and hopefully create some of our own content as well. I look forward to seeing you in the lesson. Thank you for listening.